Want to thank Sonja for her time today. Sonja, can you please introduce yourself and what do you do and where you live and where is your practice?
Viljoen, I stay in the beautiful town of Kaapstad. It's about 25 kilometers outside of Nelspruit. And so I'm very fortunate. It's a pristine area. I basically would do a lot of work for the industry. So my initial qualification is industrial and organizational psychology, where I work with teams in the industry. And I've done my master's in positive psychology. I'm also a qualified counselor, so I've done my training. And I'm a very passionate person. And I'm married, and I've got 3 dogs, 2 staffies and a Jack Russell, and I just enjoy life. I love life.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So today we're talking about cash and transit, heists and hijackings and the impact it has on not only the security guards, but the families, the domino effect that we talk about. When you lose a loved one or a loved one is hurt within a hijacking, and if the loved one loses his life, what the impact is on the family with the maybe it's the only breadwinner within the family. So the first thing I want to ask you, what's the first reaction when you're talking to a cash and transit victim of hijacking?
When I talk to a victim of hijacking, the first thing that I notice is trauma. And the trauma is an emotional injury. So just like you, when you get a physical injury, if you break your bone, you need medical care. And that emotional trauma, it's an injury, it's a wound. So, and it needs care, just like any other injury. I think the mistake that many people make is the fact that you can't see the injury like you would do with other types of injuries. Then I think it's not that serious. But yes, it is relevant, and it is present. There is an injury, and the significance of that, that injury will have an impact on that person's life. And if not dealt with correctly in the short term, can have long-term consequences where an acute problem can become chronic, and then there's other factors at play.
Okay. Yeah, I like the idea of emotional injury. I think that paints a really nice picture of what trauma is. And on that point, how important is it to do a trauma debriefing and counseling to a victim of hijacking? And how does it impact the employee's ability to go back to work? And how long does that take when you talk about the hijacking and the emotional trauma?
First and foremost, when you do a debrief, it's a conversation. And when you talk to a person, it helps them to process what has happened to them. Because, in terms of processing, the event, it will take a person back in terms of thinking. When they think about what has happened, they start to voice it, so they talk. And when you talk, you hear yourself. And as soon as you actually speak out, what has happened to you, it's therapeutic. So it helps with a healing process, and it helps a person to deal with what has happened to them. Now, normally any traumatic event, there's certain stages, and that's universal with all people. So nobody really, can say it's not relevant to them. And all the studies that has been done has proven, that a person would typically, you would first go through denial, and then there's the bargaining stage, and then a person would get angry, and there's a depression, and eventually you want to get a person to get to acceptance. The debriefing process or the therapy process helps a person to deal with those various stages, of dealing with a trauma, and different people deal with trauma differently. So during when a professional interact with a victim, they first and foremost also need to see, okay, in what stage is the person, and then it's basically you facilitate the discussion, and it can take for some people 2 sessions, or it can take maybe 4 or 5 sessions. It depends on that specific case. But it is important that, like I said, when you deal with what we say more the acute the problems or symptoms at that stage, is actually been to prevent the problem from becoming chronic.
I think chronic, when it goes chronic, it's hard to go back to the normal. I think when you go through such a traumatic experience, that there's going to be a new normal, and nothing's going to stay the same it was. And I take it back to the pandemic now. Everybody talks about the new normal of going about things. I think that's something that can relate to the traumatic experience, like a hijacking or being shot at, or even just losing your job.
Exactly. And there would be a scar, but we can call or relate to a scar. But when you are thinking back, to that event or that traumatic event that happened to you, you don't want to become all emotional again. Um, and what I also pick up when I deal with people that has experienced trauma, when they have got a difficulty to really talk about the event, it is an indication that they are maybe that they have not dealt or processed what happened to them, um, and in most cases it's still a long journey. But people also need to get the space to deal with the trauma in their own way, but ignoring the problem will not make it go away. So that is one of the major benefits of dealing with uh, with a person in therapy. I want to share a story, just a
Yes,
short
please.
story.
I want to ask to share a story. Please tell a story.
And it's actually it's a sad story, and this is just indicating the importance of therapy. Last year, I did a trauma debrief for a team of 8 people that were involved in shop. It was a robbery that happened in the shop, and I did the group debrief, and after that debrief, uh, I did a recommendation for certain individuals. There was actually 2 people that was that was involved in the robbery, but they were more at the center. Um, so and trauma. The longer you are exposed to trauma, and it's got a bigger effect. And I made a recommendation for the person, to these 2 people, to actually go on additional therapy. And the management of that company decided otherwise, and they never actually followed up, and those individuals weren't sent for that additional therapy. I got a week ago. I on my website, on my website, I got a notification of a client that they had to contact them, and I saw that this was a client that I actually worked with last year, and then I was notified that they had a death in store. So I thought it was maybe another robbery, but when I followed up on it, it was actually a person that committed suicide, and
Sure.
it was one of the persons that I recommended that had to go for additional therapy. Now, for you, what happens is people can hide a lot behind a smile. They can be busy.
Mm.
Some people try and actually avoid going to back to that trauma, but that injury it is still there. And it can actually worsen the situation, because what people sometimes do to cope, they can either turn to alcohol or they can turn to drugs, as a means to try and cope themselves. And I think and we live in a very modern time. I think we have a stigma, you know, around therapy and you know, psychological help. It's no more a stigma, and people really need to tap into that resources that is available.
Yeah, I think from our side, from a talking point group side, I think we on this platform of the podcast, we want to change the stigma of we're not going to talk about the harder things to talk about. And this is why we started this to show people that it's not bad to go to a psychologist or a counselor. It's you can really open up and just breathe, because I think that there's a video online that talks about depression. It's a black dog. I don't know if you saw that video, but it's quite amazing to show, to visualize to people how depression works, and it's something that's really serious. And on the point of your story, what do you think that employers of cash and transit companies or any company do enough to help their employees when they go through such a traumatic experience? And if they don't, what do you think they can do to help them to go when you go through the traumatic experience to move on, or move through, not move on, but move through the experience?
When you obviously they need to send a person for counselling. I think that's an important part of it, but it's just one part. A person needs a support structure. So there's a support structure at home, but there's also a support structure at work. So colleagues and employers also need to look out for their people, and they need to allow them space. You know, after the trauma, they might not be as productive as they would have normally, that they would normally be.
Yeah.
So giving that space to actually, and you can maybe put them in a different role for a time being, if it is practical to do that. But it's also important to know the symptoms of post-traumatic stress, and really understand it. When you go for an assessment, a formal assessment, you know, a person would be categorized with basically 7 categories of post-traumatic stress. But there's basic things that people in the workplace during that time, they might be more irritable, they might be, there might be emotional outbreaks, they might have, because of poor sleep, it might find it difficult to concentrate at work. So give that person a little bit more slack, and give him a little bit more space. And I would say support them with the process of going through, you know, it will normally depend on a person-to-person basis. But if it takes 2 or 3 or maybe 4 or 5 sessions, send them for the therapy. But then also make sure that they've got a support structure at home. You know, just a follow-up question, how is it going at home? Because what my experience is, there is some people with excellent support, but there's people that's alone. And when they go home at night, there's nobody there. And that all-around support it's critical for a person to heal.
So that flows quite nicely into the next question I have for you. In your professional opinion, how long does it take a average person, because I know everybody is different, everyone's special, but how long does it take for someone went through a traumatic experience to go back to where they were before the trauma, like how they get things done, so just to get back to normal, if ever. I know there's people that just can't move through trauma and it eats them up. So how long about do you think, because I know people like having a timeline, they like to work to a date. So yeah, how long do you think, and if ever?
Okay. There's some of the clients that have recently been referred to me for counseling, but when I look at their history, they've maybe been exposed to maybe 2 or 3 major traumatic events, and they've never ever had counseling before. And I'm always shocked when I sit with a person and they tell me, about these events, and they didn't get any care. Now, those people can take longer, to actually heal, but it depends on a few factors. We all have got natural coping mechanisms and our support, in terms of our support structure. So it depends. There's not a clean answer that I can give you in terms of, it will take you 6 months or so.
Yeah.
It's person to person basis. So that's why it's so important initially, just after an event, that a person do get adequate help. It helps to facilitate that process. But what I've seen from the people that I see in my practice, I would normally, it is 4 to 6 months if it's severe trauma. If a process is really working like it should, it will not take longer. It ought to not take longer than that. But the seriousness comes when it is a more chronic post-traumatic stress disorder. Then some people actually they live with this their whole lives. And that's why therapy is so critical.
I think something that people don't understand is the severity of something like PTSD. I think that's something that happened very early in your life can have an impact now in your 50s, 60s, and then you need something to cope with. You need a crutch to get over it and go through day by day. So yeah, I think that PTSD is something that's really, really important for people to understand, and not to tell someone just to get over it, because I hate that words when we going through mental health issues, is just get over it. Tomorrow is going to be better. It is going to be better, but don't tell someone to go over it, to get over it, when you went through the same traumatic experience. So Sonja, from our side, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it very, very much. Thank you for your expertise on the questions, and yeah, have yourself a lovely weekend, and yeah, we'll talk to you again. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Thanks.